Billy Pruitt. Back in the 60s, I had the privilege of playing alongside some incredible black musicians. These blues legends included Otis Rush, who asked me to join his band with the great Sam Lay. They taught this white boy some blues.
Wow, them was the good old days. I still remember. Came out with myself and everybody started using the double shuffle, the Sam Lay double shuffle. Wow. We played the first Ann Arbor Blues Festival of 1969. It was a good time. I still had a good time. We rode up in Otis's coupe Cadillac. We talked about everything. Letty Shaw, Ernest Gatewood on bass, Otis, myself, and Billy. We didn't know if anybody was going to be there, but it was. And there were 10,000 people at the first Ann Arbor Blues Festival. I went back later to Howlin' Wolf. That was before 1969. Sure, I remember Mother Blues and Big John's. A few other places I've forgotten. I still remember them every once in a while. I pop back. Billy and I played at Mother Blues because I was playing some of that stuff with the toothpick stuck in your mouth, and I was playing some of that stuff too. I didn't know what to call it, I just did it. Billy Pruitt was good with the instrument. Billy was a good white boy with a lot of good soul. A blues soul or whatever kind of soul, just plain soul. To be honest about it, as far as I know about him, he was. That's really true. It ain't something that's just been made up. Man, don't let nobody chuck you and try to tell you different. He had to be good. You know why? You ain't seen me with a white musician unless he could play. Tell me one that played with me, he was with me because he stood out standing tall. Hit a couple of licks on it and leave it alone. I know what they're doing right. Wow. Man, we've seen it all. Them was the good old days. Wow.
Billy and I met at the first Otis Rush tribute in 2016, thanks to Dick Sherman, who produced the show. Dick won a Grammy for Best Traditional Blues Album in 1987 and was inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame in 2014. Billy and I hit it off right away. We became close friends and on-stage jamming buddies from that point on. Billy's a blues master who's been playing music for over 6 decades, and he was Otis Rush's first full-time guitarist in his band. During that time, Otis taught Billy the blues. Otis Rush has always been my hero. Open for 40 years, Blues Nightclub is the longest-running blues club in Chicago. Here's Billy and Dick Sherman at the legendary Blues on Halsted Club.
Give him hell, Billy.
I don't know. I'm in the Artist Protection Program, and my career is the best-kept secret in show business.
Hey, Billy Pruitt. Fancy
Hey,
meeting
man.
you in a blues club.
Well, this is where I live. Now you know where I live.
Well, we've both been in a good number of them in our day, and as long as we're here, let's talk some blues, and we might as well play some blues, too.
Hell yeah. Okay, so we'd go down to Maxwell Street, and it'd sound like this. And... Come on. What's one note between friends? Come on. If you're in the neighborhood, just stop
There's
in.
only one. Okay.
Yeah, it's been a while, right? A few years, or?
Well, it goes back over 50 now. In fact, I can tell you the exact day that I met you because I still have the poster. It was when Otis Rush played at the Viking Temple at 68th and Emerald, and it was November 9, 1968.
Wow.
That's when you were playing with Otis.
I don't know what love is, but I'll tell you on my Saturday.
It's all gone from there.
That was a social club.
That was, of course, seeing you with Otis Rush, that was a great meeting ground, but let's talk about how you got there. So.
All right.
Let's rewind and go back to the beginning and talk about. I remember you saying that your father is from the same town in Mississippi as Charlie Musselwhite.
Kosciuszko, Mississippi. Bobby Gentry and Charlie Musselwhite and all that. It was a very backwards town and in the 40s.
But that's not where you were born or grew up.
No, that's where my father was from. I was born a white boy in 1945 in Buffalo, New York. We lived in the Mayflower apartment building in Buffalo and then moved to a house later on, which I recently visited, by the way, which is really, I went back there 72 years later and I sent a press kit just to the address and this guy responded, Pete Morlow, from 799 Bird Avenue, and that was fun. But my dad was from Kosciuszko and he was raised typically Southern. And some of my first memories of music was riding in the back of my dad's car. I'd stand behind the driver's seat and I'd look out the window about this high. And one day he passed by it must have been a blues bar, and I was probably just 4 or 5 years old, and there was bending strings. It must have been a shuffle. I don't know what it was, but I knew I liked it because my parents. In 45, there was no television. Television didn't come in until 48, 49, 50. It wasn't even affordable till then. But all we had was a radio in Buffalo, and it was mostly like big band stuff. It was, it didn't interest me so much. And I heard that funky music, and I'll never forget it, when I was 4 or 5. And my dad was a day drinker, and he had a nice job and all that. He had a straight job, and he'd go for lunch, and sometimes I'd go to work with him. And he'd bring me in the bars, and that was in like 47, 48, 49. And, at that time, the kids could go into bars, and it was not a big deal. And I just remember coming in and seeing the blue neon and the orange neon, and I thought, man, that's another world. And I absorbed that feeling, and then I put that together with the funky music I heard coming from that bar that one day. And I realized how you could create moods just from feelings and music and people hear with their eyes.
Was there a part of your upbringing that led you to seek comfort or escape in blues?
Yeah, later on, they sent me to Pokagon summer camp in Angola, Indiana, and we used to sit around the campfire and sing straight songs, folk songs and all, and some guy had a harmonica. I said, man, that's kind of a cool instrument. And so I got a harmonica, and I realized I could put that in my pocket, and it was my friend, and I could just take it wherever I wanted. And it eventually started opening doors that would allow me to make new friends for a lifetime.
Don't leave me no more. Something like it.
And so that kind of gave me a little comfort, with the harmonica in my pocket all the time.
Do you remember the first blues artist or blues band that you saw live in the circumstances?
I remember it was Lonnie Mack, the first blues person that I ever saw live. If you could say Lonnie Mack was blues, because he had a tremolo and it was the first fast guitar I ever heard. I think it was Memphis. And I had just put a band together, and my buddy and I, we were both lead guitar players, and so I wanted to have I heard about guitar bands. So he knew a drummer, he knew a drummer, and we got this drummer, and then he knew another lead guitar player. So my first band was 3 lead guitars and a drummer. We played for like 4 or 5, months, we were house band at this place, and it left something to be desired, because it was 3 lead guitars and a drummer, and I knew it was missing something. And so one night I heard on the radio Lonnie Mac's playing a bar downtown. I was 16 years old, and I was the leader of the band because I had a car. The other guys were 15 years old, and so I had to go see Lonnie Mac. I heard it on the radio. I think it was Memphis, and so I went downtown, and of course, they wouldn't let me in the bar. The bouncer wouldn't let me in, but he let me stand on the sidewalk way away and look into the bar. I saw the lights again. It reminded me of my dad's neon. I heard the sound. I said, "Wow, that's the sound I'm looking for. I don't know what that sound is," and it was just so full. I couldn't. And then I noticed one of the guys had 4 strings on his guitar, and I'd never heard that, And I said, "Jesus, I got to get this sound." So they took a break. They came out. I ignored Lonnie and I talked to the bass player. And I said, "What's the 4 strings?" He goes, "Well, it's called a bass guitar." And I said, "Well, how do you get that sound?" He goes, "Well, you just pluck it." And it had so much bottom. So that was where I discovered bass guitar. So I was on my way now.
And you had Lonnie Mac's Magnatone amp to mess with your head too.
Well, the tremolo. I mean, back in the day when I was 8 or 9, I used to listen to Duane Eddy, and first song I ever learned was Rumble. That was Link Wray. I had a Fender amp that didn't have a tremolo, and so I went downtown and I got a Silvertone amp with a tremolo. Now I was really rolling. So Lonnie Mac was, I couldn't believe, I'd never heard anybody that fast. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
As long as we're talking about Omaha, could you talk about meeting Buddy Miles there?
I met Buddy Miles in Omaha. That was when I was probably 16 years old. He was in a local group called the Premiers. And I met Buddy Miles, and they were doing, black soul music. That's how I met Buddy, and then our paths crossed as time went on, and I met him later on in Chicago.
Let's backtrack a while, and you have mentioned that Jimmy Reed at Carnegie Hall was a real early influence. Can you talk about early blues records you bought or ran into that?
The records that I bought, first of all, my parents sent me to military school right before Omaha, before I was 16. I was like 14 and 15 in military school, and I found Ray Charles' live album with Tell the Truth. I couldn't believe the sound. And then one of the guys in the school, Paco Rivera, showed me La Bamba. I had a real good Gibson guitar, and so I had that album, and I started buying other albums. And then later on, when I moved to Omaha, I saw Jimmy Reed at Carnegie Hall, that album, the Double VJ, I guess, had Phil Upchurch on that, and Bo Diddley. I bought Bo Diddley as a gunslinger, and he had his motor scooter and all that on. And then Chuck Berry, of course. And that's when I started writing original songs, which was basically Johnny B. Good with different words, So we were an original band.
Now, when you say we were an original band, what band was that?
Well, that was called Bill and the Highdeckers. My buddy Mike Lipman was my best friend, and we were outcasts in school. I went to Westside High School in Omaha, Nebraska, and that was my last year in high school, freshman year. After that, I quit. I quit high school and went to military school, and didn't, my parents never encouraged music, and I never learned to read, or, they said if you're going to play music for a living, you should definitely learn how to read, and I just didn't want to do that. So it was Bill and the Highdeckers. We used to cruise through this place called Merrill's Highdecker on Dodge Avenue in Omaha, Nebraska, and that was when drive-in car hops were really happening. And I had a 54 Chevy, a black Chevy, and Mike Lipman and I were sitting in there, and one day we said, what are we going to call this band? And he goes, I don't know. And we looked around. Merrill's Highdecker. There you go. How about Bill and the Highdeckers? And so Bill and the Highdeckers it was. So I went to a sign painter, and at that time there was no laser, no stage lights, nothing. So I wanted some kind of sign in front. And so I found this place where you could buy these big band, where you put the sheet music, and there was 2 things. So I got 2 of those to put out in front of the bandstand. So I went to the sign painter, and who hated rock and roll. They were older guys, right? And I was 16, I was a punk, and I said, could you put Bill and the Highdeckers, paint this on the thing, and and I'll pay you. And he goes, sure. So they did this artsy craftsy lettering of these, off. That was kind of modern at that time, and he made the the D looked like a P because it was all artsy craftsy, and I didn't notice it, you know. So I'm playing Buster B's Danceville and for months, and people would come up to the bandstand and they'd look at the sign and they'd start laughing, and I'd go, yeah, we bad, that's right, we bad, And then I realized later on, Red Bill and the Hypeckers. So that was my first bad review in rock and roll and blues.
Self-inflicted wound.
Yeah.
Speaking of our early band days, when and where and how did you run into Wayne Cochran?
That was later on when, after Omaha, Nebraska, I joined the Air Force when I was 16 years old and 17 years old, and went to the Air Force in California, played all around, played at the Airmen's Club. A guy named Tom Giving was in the band, and he used to blow an alto and a tenor sax at the same time. And I'd never heard a guy blow two horns in harmony. It was just incredible. I played those gigs, and then after I got out of the Air Force, I just bounced around California for a while, and my parents just said, they didn't want me out there. They wanted to do anything but music. Doctor, lawyer, engine chief, anything at all, And so my parents talked me into, they said, why don't you come to Florida? They were kind of retired, living in West Palm Beach. So I went down, so I said, okay, I'll move to Florida. So I went down there, started a band called What's Left. Couldn't think of a name. We liked The Who. And I said, well, there's no more names left. What's Left? So it became What's Left, and we did some newspaper articles and got a little publicity going with What's Left. At one point, we're doing some original music and some Beatles, and I ended up in a Beatle band at the end of this little phase. Some originals, Chuck Berry and all that stuff, but I heavily got into James Brown. I said, man, I thought James Brown was just the coolest dude ever. The Tammy Show came out.
Pretty fantastic movie.
Unbelievable, right. So I heavily got into James Brown, so I got a James Brown wig and a James Brown cape, and I used to do all this footwork, and I couldn't sing, so I played harmonica. I'd go down on my knees, they'd put the cape on me and carry me off stage, and I thought it was a good act. I was imitating him, but little did I know I'd be working at the Barn with Wayne Cochran, another James Brown imitator, and eventually we got a job at the Barn on the Miami Causeway. We'd come off stage, it was one continuous set, they'd play their last song and we'd come up and imitating James Brown along with Wayne Cochran, I love James Brown. I'd go to the drive-in movie by myself. There was no video, there was no videotapes or anything, or YouTube that you could watch, and so I had to study this guy and see what he was doing. And I remember one night I was at the drive-in movie watching James Brown. He came out on one foot, and I said, man, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And everybody at the drive-in started honking their horns and turning their lights on and off, and I thought, oh man, everybody's into it, everybody likes it. And then the picture went out, and they went to the next reel, and I said, what? I came here for James. So I went to the projection booth, and I talked to the guy, and I said, hey, I came to see James Brown, why'd you turn it off? And he goes, everybody hated it, that's why they were honking their horns. And it made me so sad, and so that was one of my first encounters with black and white in the 60s in America, and I started seeing how things work, and that also brought me to the blues.
1969 was the year I was honored in a Sun-Times magazine article featuring the top Chicago blues bands. The title of the article was Black, White, and the Blues. I was the white, the guy that title was referring to. Being honored with so many great black musicians back then reminds me of a life-changing experience I had at the age of 4 riding in my dad's car. My father intentionally swerved toward a black policeman directing traffic, forcing him to jump out of the way. I will never forget the sad look on his face as he passed by so close to my open window. I was just too young to understand why that happened. I didn't realize it back then, but from that moment on, I would somehow try to make it right, even though I wasn't sure how I could do that. Later on, when I found the blues and started to play that music well, I didn't feel the guilt and pain of that incident anymore. Blues made me feel happy and connected. It gave me the ability to spread that feeling of goodwill and happiness to any audience in any language.
Thanks, everybody. Good night. Goodbye till next year.
You've posted a picture on Facebook of you with Otis Redding. Can you talk about how much of him you saw and what that encounters were like?
That was at a concert in Fort Lauderdale when I first moved to Florida. And I had a little apartment. It was basically across the street from where Otis was playing, and he was still pretty big. I decided to, I wanted to see Otis Redding, so I walked across the street, and it was an auditorium that held probably 400 or 500 people, and it was raining that night. It was a terrible night, and so there were only like 20 people in the audience that ended up coming out. And he had like a huge band, 12, 13-piece horn section and everything. I thought, well, I'm going to meet Otis, and so I just stood by the backstage door, and he pulled up in a Volkswagen Beetle. He just walked in, and I said, Otis, I'm Billy Pruitt. I'm a guitar player. And he goes, okay, and he called me Slick. I had all the hair and everything. And so I just hung around him all that night, and I followed him around, and he put on a great show for like 20 people. It was unbelievable. The band was barely outnumbered.
Can you talk about the first time you saw Bobby Bland and the circumstances involved, not all music?
The first time I saw Bobby Bland, that was one of the albums that I bought when I was in the Air Force. Here's the Man, Bobby Bland. He had 36, 22, 36, I believe.
Turn On Your Love Light.
Love Light. I couldn't believe it. Right, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Wayne Bennett was a guitar player on there who we would cross paths later on in Chicago again. I had that Here's the Man album, unbelievable. So we went to, I was putting my band together at that time, and there was a drummer in Miami, and he said, "Did you ever see Bobby Bland?" And I said, "No, man, but I got his album." He goes, "You want to see Bobby Bland?" I said, yeah, let's go. So he made this reservation at this all-black club in Miami. I think it was called the Tropic Club or something. It had neon palm trees, and so he said, "You ever smoke marijuana?" And I said, "No, man, what's that?" And at that time I was, I had a few beers in the Air Force, but he started rolling doobies, and that was when marijuana was heroin. It was a really, it was like Reefer Madness, in the movie. So he gave me some hits, I said, whoa, this is, man, I've never felt like this. And so we were both really loaded, and we went down to the Tropic Club in Miami. It was kind of a small club, but he had the big horn band and Wayne Bennett and everything. And I remember there was a balcony, and he came walking all around the balcony. He came down and did Love Light and all the songs, and we were sitting there right there at the front table, the only white folks in the club, and it just totally blew my mind. I was a young kid on marijuana. That was my first encounter with Bobby Bland.
What led you to New York?
I was playing with some Beatle band. The Beatles had just come out. It was about 65. Some agent put together a Beatle band, and and at that time there was no specific members. I wasn't John or Paul or anything. It was, he put together 5 guys. He goes, yeah, go ahead, you guys. Just, you're the Beatles. Put on a wig and play. And so I had a Super Beatle amp, the big 7-foot Super Beatle transistor amp that was on wheels and everything. I didn't feel fulfilled, and wherever I lived in any town, I always knew where the local record store was. I could ride my bike there, and then when I finally got a license when I was 16, I could drive my car there, and I always hung out at the record store because it was 45s. I always bought 45s. I did, before then, I actually bought 178, which was Transfusion by Nervous or something.
Yeah, Nervous.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a 78, but after that I bought 45s. And so I always knew where the local record store was. So when I'd, be feeling down and, longing for the blues and all that, I'd go down to the record store, and I was going through the same bins, the same, Rolling Stones, Dave Clark 5. They're okay, Jerry and the Pacemakers. And so I looked over in the corner, and there was in the dark little corner, there was just a little rack, and it said blues. It had a little handwritten sign, blues. I said, oh, that's interesting. So I went over there, and I started looking at the blues. I said, wow, look at some of these guys. Red Fox was in there. I said, I don't know, he doesn't belong in here. And I came across Paul Butterfield Blues Band. I said, what? Wow, that looks cool. And I turned it over and said, he's from Chicago, and he recorded this album. It was the first Butterfield Blues Band, born in Chicago. He'd been playing, he recorded that album in New York, but he was from Chicago. And so, I didn't think much of it, so I bought a couple albums, and I brought it home, and I put it on. And from the moment I heard Born in Chicago again, I couldn't believe that harp sound. I said, man, that's it. This is what I want to do.
It's amazing how many lives that album changed.
Yeah. It changed mine. It made me be convinced that that's what I want to do the rest of my life. It really hooked me in the blues like I had when I was a little kid, 5 years old. I kind of got the blues tingling But when I heard Paul, it was like a pit bull bit my ankle and wouldn't let go. I said, man, that sound, and I didn't know what the sound was because I'd heard Jimmy Reed, that was a squeaky first position harp, but I'd never heard an electric harp like that, how, but I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I had to do that. So I quit the Beatle band, I put my Super Beatle amp in I had a Volkswagen at that time with a sunroof. It didn't fit in the car, so the amp stuck out the sunroof, and I said, I'm gonna move to New York, I'm gonna get a job, I'm gonna meet some blues guys, I'm gonna figure out how he makes that sound. And on the album it said, he recorded this in New York, and I said, well, I better stop by New York first. Maybe there's a gig there. I can find a blues band there or something, or maybe I can even meet Paul, And so I drove to New York before I came to Chicago, and in New York I went in the Albert Hotel, which is where coincidentally Paul Butterfield had been staying, and all the musicians were there because it was like $20 a night. It was really a cheap hotel, and the bathroom was at the end of the hall. I used to wander down to the huge spooky basement of the Albert Hotel where bands used to rehearse that looked like catacombs or something, and there was a new band rehearsing down there that I'd never heard of called the Lovin' Spoonfuls. And I moved to New York. They stole my guitar out of the car when I went in to register, and then I parked the car. I thought you could park in New York and then you had to park 10 blocks away. Then they stole my car. So there I was in New York. I didn't have I didn't have a guitar, I didn't have my car, but I was still determined to see Paul. As it turned out, he had been playing at Cafe A Go-Go in the basement of Greenwich Village, 151 Bleecker Street. And it was the basement of this place, and it was called Cafe A Go-Go. And there was a theater above there that was a big, like a movie theater. And during that time, I saw Mothers of Invention, and they had a guitar player named Lowell George, who we would cross paths later on. But Paul came out, and they had 10 Vocal Master columns all around. It was a small club, little Cafe A Go-Go. He came out, he did was and I went, sold. I'm gonna learn how to do that, and all these Vocal Master PA columns were around, and it was just vibrating my chest. I said, I couldn't believe the sound, I said, I don't know how he does that, but he does it with his throat, and someday I'm gonna learn that. I've been called the ghost of Paul Butterfield, so I thought if I got close enough, maybe some of it would rub off. So I had to meet Paul, and so I ambushed him in the Albert Hotel. I knew that they'd come up to their room when they were done with the club, so I stood in the hall for a couple hours, and here comes Paul with his band, and so I said, hey, Paul, hey, I'm Billy Pruitt. He was in the elevator, and I said, yeah, I'm, they were doing a new album, then Keep On Moving or something with Bugsy Ma and the great little guitar player,
Buzzy Feely.
Buzzy Feely, right, yeah. Who's played an incredible solo on that album. And so Paul was there in the elevator, and I said, I'm Billy Pruitt, and I know you're doing an album right down the street here, so would you mind if I'd come down and maybe just hang out for a while? And Paul said, no. And he closed the elevator door, and I just watched him close like that. I said, oh, well, okay. So that's my first encounter with Paul Butterfield. So I was totally rejected, and he wouldn't let me go hang out to hear his album recorded, but I knew it had to be as good as the first Butterfield album.
So it was Butterfield and Born in Chicago that led you to Chicago?
Yeah, so then, a few months later, the police called. They said, we found your car, Volkswagen Beetle with 120,000 miles on it. Somebody drove it to California and back, and they abandoned it. So I got my car back. So I said, man, now I'm going to Chicago. So I drove to Chicago with my Super Beetle amp, and I got a room at the Grand Wells Hotel at the corner of Grand and Wells, real sleazebag hotel. And any hotel I was in, I'd wheel my Super Beetle amp into the hotel. And so I read on the album that it said Paul had been playing at Big John's for quite some time, and he was discovered. And so I said, I'm going to Big John. So the Grand Wells Hotel was real close to Old Town, and I thought I'm gonna go walk down, and I'm gonna see Big John's. And
And just for geographical clarity, Big John's was also on Wells, just north of North Avenue.
Right,
100-something.
It was on the corner, I think, of North and Wells, and when I got there, it had already been torn down. It was a parking lot, but I'm walking down Wells Street, from the Grand Wells Hotel. It was about a 5 or 10 block walk, and I'm playing my harmonica, walking down the street, and some Vice guys drove in, and they grabbed me, and they said, "Where's your dope?" And I said, "What?" I said, "You're puffing dope, right? You're huffing it." And I said, "No, I'm playing harmonica." And the guys, and they searched me and everything, and they were going to handcuff me. And they were real disappointed because I was walking down the street like this, and they thought I was huffing dope. So I went down to North and Wells. Big John's had been torn down, and so I just walked down the street, and Mother Blues was the place that all the blues bands had relocated to. And I met Lorraine Blue there, and she used to let me in. I was a regular, so I'd go there every night and just sit around, and that's when I had to find a band and get a job and learn these blues.
In what year would this have been?
When did the Butterfield album come out? It was just a couple of years past that, so
in fact, 67, 68.
yeah. So I went to Mother Blues, and I just sat there every night, and I said, I gotta learn the blues. I gotta find somebody, to teach me blues and learn, because I was doing okay, but I played a little harp and a little guitar. But I went to Mother Blues, and so I started sitting in with bands. So any night, every night there was blues. There was Magic Sam, Otis Spann, Albert Collins, Howlin' Wolf. And so I just started forcing myself to sit into bands, and I've sat on Magic Sam for a song, and he didn't need any help. He was real distant. Howlin' Wolf was playing there, and Wolf, man, could I jam? I'm a new guitar player in town here, and I'm looking for a job. And he goes, oh, you come around later, maybe, And so last set, he brought me up. At that time, I'd heard the original Butterfield album, and Mike Bloomfield was the star guitar player. So I'd never heard real blues guitar before, and Bloomfield was fast and frantic. And so I thought, well, that's the faster you are, the better guitar player you are. So Wolf Start's a good song. I don't know what it was, 44 or something. It was a good song. And so he started playing, and he nodded at me, and I started, and he goes, slow down, And so I said, okay. And so the song ended, and he goes, listen, I'm going to give you one more chance, all right? Just take your time. Just take your time. And I said, well, I thought he meant, well, tease the audience. Let go 4, 6, or 8 bars or something, and then come in. So I said, okay, I'll take my time. So I just hugged my guitar. So he started the song, and I said, that's right. I'm gonna impress you now. And so and then he said, all right, go ahead. and he just stopped me, and he took my arm, and he goes, let's give him a hand as he leaves the bandstand, ladies and gentlemen. It's Billy Pruitt or somebody.
Well, so supposedly he told Jimi Hendrix a lot worse than that in St. Louis.
Wow. So I've been rejected by the best, So anyway, so that was my audition with him. And
so how was it there that you sat in with Otis too?
Mother Blues. I just kept sitting in with people and forcing myself in the band. Refused to be fired, and then Otis was playing one night. A real gentleman, didn't look like a blues guy. He had a tie and a nice shirt, and he always wore a suit, and real well groomed, and a gentleman, very polite, soft spoken. And so he's playing, and I guess Steve Miller used to come in a lot and sit in, and Butterfield once in a while, and he'd come in and sit on the stage and play harp. And I said, Otis, I ambushed him in the corner, and you're really great, and could I sit in? And I'm kind of looking for a job, but maybe I could sit in with you. And he goes, all right. What's your name? And it's Billy Pruitt. So it goes, okay, Prudence, we're gonna let you in. And he called me the whole time. He always called me Prudence. And so he brought me up. I did real good, man. I learned my lesson from Wolf. I just took my time, and I played nice. And so after the set, I thought, man, I probably blew this one too, but I got to get a job. And so he came to me, after the set, and he goes, hey, how would you like to join my band? I said, yeah, okay. And goes, okay, you can be a member of my band. Said, sure. And so that 69, we did Ann Arbor Blues Festival, Sammy Lay, Ernest Gatewood, Eddie Shaw. And 69, I also went to the original Woodstock. I actually went to Woodstock.
That reminds me of another name mangling at Mother Blues involving Janis Joplin. Can you talk about that?
Yes, Janis Joplin was in town for some show. I talked to Corky Siegel, and he said he picked her up for that show. I knew Corky and all those guys. I was living on the south side of 71st and Lakeshore Drive. It was like a hippie crash pad. There was 10 of us all sharing the rent, and there was like 8 bedrooms, and everybody was sleeping in the attic and everywhere. And Tom Swan lived in that in that house with me.
Yeah, Tom Swan worked for Chess and was mostly reissues, but he produced part of Muddy Waters After the Rain album.
I was good friends with Tom Swan. He was a heavily influenced blues guy. And then next door there was Jeff Karp or somebody. He was a harp player. And I guess Janice was seeing Jeff Karp next door. So Jeff said, well, Otis is playing with Billy down at Mother Blues. Why don't we go down there? And I was playing the one night. She walks in, and I remember looking at it. And she was sitting where I usually sit in the booth right across the stage. And so she's sitting there. And I guess she's with Jeff Karp or two of them.
Yeah, she was with Jeff.
Was it Jeff?
I mean, I don't know about that night, but they were.
Right, they were a couple.
Yeah.
For a while, right? Because she was over there for quite a while. Janice is sitting there, and so God, Janis Joplin, man, she was huge at that time. It was right around Monterey Pop, and I said, Otis, man, I said, Janis Joplin's right here. Maybe you should invite her up to sing. And he goes, who? And I said, Janis Joplin. And he goes, oh, okay. So he says, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest in the house tonight. Janet Joplin is with us tonight. Janet Joplin. Let's see if we can't get her up. Let's give her a hand. And she was real offended, She goes, I'm not Janet. And so he goes, come on. She's probably shy. Janet Jocelyn is a Joplin. What is it, Prudence? I said, that's close enough. And she goes, you, Otis. I'm not playing. And Otis goes, what's going on? I said, I don't think she's going to play. And so she stands up, and Otis goes, now she's coming. And Jan, she says, I got to get out of here. So she goes to the back of Mother Blues, that little club, and a guy named Don Yoshida. He was an artist, a really young guy, long black hair, and he was the bartender that night. So Janice goes back to him, and she goes, I got to get out of here. And so Don says, okay. And so he let her out the back door and walked around the alley and went out front and got her a cab. And it's a funny thing because the last Otis tribute, that thanks to you, that I played at Space a couple months ago, I booked a table for 4, and Linda and I were there, and we didn't know who was going to sit next to us. And Don Yoshida and his wife, we were at the same table. Funny how those things work, That's the Janet Job, so that's the last time she came in there.
But not the last name Otis would mangle.
And Prudence is just fine with me.
So when I met you in late '68, Otis was playing mostly clubs around town. I mean, every once in a while you might go, to some psychedelic palace or something, but he wasn't really, heavy-duty touring or anything like that. It was mostly still the ghetto clubs, even though he was kind of on the cusp because the powers that be, including Albert Grossman and Nick Gravenites and Bloomfield, were trying to give him a hand up the ladder with that Morning in the Morning album. But
who I was playing with him during that time, by the way, and I was crushed when they didn't invite me. I said, I'll buy my own plane ticket. He goes, Nick doesn't, he wants to play guitar,
But yeah, I remember I was sitting at a table with Nick in that club on the Pulaski that night before he was waiting there to drive Otis down to Muscle Shoals when the gig was over. Anyhow, so that the first time I met you was at that social club set at the Viking Temple, which was a pretty interesting evening. They had the shake dancer and all the trimmings. But the first club where I would see you every Friday night was the L&A Club at 1422 South Pulaski. Later on, it was called the Majestic.
Okay.
And I just want that definitely was a pretty wild place. Although here we are both talking about it. And by the way, I should probably interject here that we're talking about Otis Rush, who gave many great performances on the stage where we're sitting right now reminiscing about him, along with all the other great people that have played here over the last 40 years. I had my wedding reception in here. Played with Magic Slim.
And Jimmy Johnson's 90th birthday party was here just a few months ago, and I want to be just like him when I grow up. I'm going for 100. I want to have him help me up.
Anyhow, I just wondered if you had any particular recollections of that club on the west side, the L&A.
I remember walking down the street, and I still had my Volkswagen Beetle with 120,000 miles on it, and I would park 2 or 3 blocks away. It was on Saturday night, it was hard to park, and I'd go walking down the street, you know, in this in pretty bad neighborhood, right? And I'd just be walking down with my guitar and amp, and I remember the police used to pull up next to me, and they'd go, what are you doing? I said, I'm playing with Otis Rush right here. And they said, what, do you have a gun? And I said, no, that's illegal. And they said, my partner and I would never bust you. You should have a gun walking around this neighborhood.
My father told me, son, you had better get a gun.
That's the kind of advice they would be giving me all the time. You know?
Yeah, especially over there. It was pretty rough there.
Right.
But you mentioned the I Spy. Now that was on the south side. That was on West 63rd Street on the 500 block on the north side of the street. When I interviewed Charlie Musselwhite last year, he said it was his favorite club, which kind of surprised me. The owner ended up getting shot in the back a few times, and I didn't know anybody who was sorry about it. That was how he ran that place. But you and I had a fateful night at the I Spy, which back in the day too was known as the Rock and Roll. Apparently, a lot of the
with the I Spy, they had a painting of a guy with a gun, like a James Bond thing.
Silhouette, right, shooting a drink out of somebody's head.
And that was
what you need in a bar.
Right.
That was where we got the thrill of witnessing the owner of the I Spy not only shoot Otis's new used Coupe de Ville that he had bought with his advance for doing Morning in the Morning.
Right.
The owner shot his car in the fender. But you mentioned harmonica player Jeff Karp.
Right.
He was playing with Sam Lay at the time, and Sam was drumming with Otis that night, and his band was alternating sets. And when the owner ran out on the street shooting after a guy who I'll let you describe in a minute, and shot Otis's car, can you talk about how that incident unfolded?
Well, you were there, right? You were.
Yeah, I was one of 6 guys sitting in a booth, all trying to be the first guy under the table, and none of us could move.
Right, you got wedged in, and nobody could move.
You had a better vantage point than that. So.
And I was on the other side of the stage with Otis, and then all I knew is we started playing, and I heard pop, 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 and I saw Otis dive under the table on the other side of the club, and you were stuck underneath, and boom, 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 and kept hearing these shots, and so I got under the table with Otis, and here he was, a gentleman with a white shirt and a tie on, and his chin was like on the floor, and every time, boom, boom, he'd jump, and there I was, laying on my chest right next to him, and he goes, well, Prudence, you wanted to learn about the blues, didn't you? Boom, 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 boom. I said, damn, and we survived, right? We're survivors. After the gig, we used to go to Harold's Fried Chicken. I think there was one on 63rd, and that was at 2 or 3 in the morning. And I never had any fear. I always felt, if I was with Otis, that people would protect me, and it worked, But you don't get old by being stupid, so I don't know.
Can you talk about, there was a night playing with Otis when you said the bass player Ernie Gatewood came to your rescue?
Oh, that was at Mother Blues. It was always hard to park on Wells Avenue, on Wells Street. So I used to park, I'd find a place 3 or 4 blocks away and then walk down the street with my guitar. These 3 little kids were just punks looking to steal anything, and they were only 12, 13 years old, but very strong and dangerous. So I'm walking down the street with my guitar. I used to carry my guitar like this, because one time in Greenwich Village, I saw Wes Montgomery carry his guitar like that. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, so I used to hug it and carry it like that. Plus, I guess it was functional, you could hold on to it. So these kids just started circling me, and they were real unorganized, and they were going, get his wallet, no, get his keys, get his guitar, man, get it. And this one kid had a little ball-peen hammer, and so they break his knees, man, boom, and they started swinging, and I was jumping around, and Ernest was looking for a place to park too, and he got out. He had a big motorcycle chain with hardened steel, and he got out of his car with this huge chain, and he just started walking toward the kids, man, and they split everywhere. And I go, thank you, Ernest, man, and he saved me that night. So I still had my guitar, my 335.
Can you talk about Freddie King coming into the I Spy and borrowing your pick?
Yeah, that was the I Spy Lounge. I'm playing one night with Otis, and it was a little stage about this size. Otis was playing, and in walks Freddie King, right? I said, man, because I always listen to Freddie King, I guess military school and from there on out.
Yeah, and Freddie played the I Spy a lot. Supposedly he was one of the few guys who didn't have trouble getting paid by the owner, because Freddie was pretty beefy and ready to go. But also Freddie loved Otis, so yeah.
I guess so,
went way back.
because he wasn't getting paid or anything. He just came in and he had his old raggedy guitar case and he walked in and Otis, Freddie King, ladies and gentlemen, let's see if we can get him up here. And of course he just walks right up, So he gets his guitar on and tunes up, and the stage is, he's like 300 pounds, so the stage is really small. So I'm standing behind him. I'm like right up against the wall in my amp, and he's right here. I said, "Man, it's Freddie King. It's Freddie King." And I think Sammy Lay was playing drums, Eddie Shaw, Ernest Gatewood, and Otis, and that was the band. Freddie. So Freddie gets all tuned up. What are you gonna do? And he calls out something, and he leans over his shoulder, and goes, "Hey man, yeah, you got a pick?" I said, "Oh, sure." And I had on my amp, I had all kinds of. Here's a tortoise shell, and this is a medium light from Fender. This is a Fender heavy gauge. And he goes, "Man, I just want to play. Give me a pick." And so I said, "Oh, okay. Well, here's an extra heavy. Is that okay?" And he goes, "Yeah." And so he turns around, and I didn't see it, but he must have put it in his shirt pocket. And so he plays this great set, with his fingers. And I didn't know that he played with his fingers. That was the joke, right? So he ends he plays his last song. And then I guess he went into his pocket and he turned around and goes, "Thank you, man." I said, "Man, here's the pick. This is the pick that Freddie, I'm going to save this, man. Put it on eBay or something, It wasn't on eBay then, but I said, "Man, I got the pick that Freddie King played with, And so at the end of the night, we're packing up. Sammy's packing up his drums and everything. And I said, "Otis, I got the pick that Freddie King used." And they started laughing, and Sammy Lay started laughing. And I go, "What, man? This is a pick Freddie King used, man. This is my pick, all right?" And they just kept laughing at me. And I said, "What, man?" And Otis goes, "He was just f***ing with you, man. He doesn't use a pick." And I was so deflated. I said, "What?" That was Freddie King's, I guess he had a sense of humor like that. So.
While we're talking about Otis, I was at Delmark Records on Monday, and there's a photo exhibit there now, pictures from the '69 Ann Arbor Blues Festival. It's there for about a month. You should pop in if you've got some time.
Is there a picture of the band?
No, it's just
there's
Otis.
not one picture that exists. I've tried everywhere.
No. But it's worth taking a look at. But talk about that. That's pretty historic in retrospect. This is the 50th anniversary of the first Ann Arbor Blues Festival. So,
right.
What are your recollections of that?
I just remember that we were going to play the first Ann Arbor Blues Festival, so we were riding, I think, in Otis's Cadillac. So Otis picked up everybody, and we're gonna go play the Ann Arbor Blues Festival. I don't know what it's gonna be like because there's never been one, but it must be cool, right? So he had a little teeny U-Haul that we'd put the drums and the amps in, put it on his Cadillac, and then two of us would ride in front and the three would ride in back. We got to the Ann Arbor Blues Festival. Man, there were 10,000 people. That's 10,000 people, right?
You played for more than that. We'll put an asterisk.
Once again, yeah, thanks to you, right. At that festival, Howlin' Wolf, Charlie Musselwhite, all those guys, and that was just the biggest, that blew my mind. That was the Ann Arbor Blues Festival, and there I was, and Otis would give me maybe one solo of a set, so I had to really make it count, But that was a big event in my life, the first Ann Arbor Blues Festival, 1969, which is the year I did my album, too.
Right, we'll get to that in a minute, but one question before we do, and that is, you mentioned the New York tour. Now, that was in '69 because it was supposed to be the tour to promote the release of Otis's Morning in the Morning album.
That I didn't play on.
On Cotillion, right, yes. But can you talk, unfortunately, this was a sad pattern for Otis. He didn't take well either to the studio or the road, and there were more than a few canceled tours in his wake at the end of the day. So can you talk about how this one went?
Oh, the New York tour?
Yeah.
I did. It wasn't clear where we were going to play or how long it was going to be, but hey, getting in the car and we're going to, I'm yours, Otis, whatever. We're out there 3 months on the road, that's fine. I guess New York City, I don't know. Or he had some little clubs booked around New York, and so like some social clubs. And I just remember I was so young, I used to take Vivarin, these little caffeine pills. Thought it was cool, man. I'd get wired, and I was never into drugs. So we're driving, Otis is real bored, and I said, "Otis, try one of these, man, a little Vivarin, and he goes, "Okay," So he took one, and a half hour later he goes, I don't feel anything. I said, "It's just caffeine, man, but it'll make the ride more interesting because we got a long way to go, Yeah, okay, so he took another one. About an hour later, he has this panic attack. He says, "I think I'm gonna die." I said, what are you talking about, man? He goes, I've never felt like this, man. I feel all jittery. Take me to hospital. Eddie Shaw was driving or something. We found this little hospital in some little town in New York, and he went in the emergency room, and so we're sitting out there for hours. I guess the doctors just counseled him, you know, and he said, you know, they said, what did you take? And he said, I don't know, some little pill or something, I don't know what it was. And so they counseled him and talked him down for about 4 hours, and he was okay, so he came back out, and then we went back on the road. And as it turned out, we only did one date at some, I don't know what it was like a, kind of like a movie theater, dinner theater kind of place, and we're going back to Chicago. Okay, well, these tours, I can do these tours, you know.
So at that time, you did start work on what was supposed to be your first album, So Many Barriers.
Right, So Many Barriers.
And a great lineup. Can you talk about?
Yeah, I had the right guys. The So Many Barriers album was Donny Hathaway on piano and Phil Upchurch on bass, who I'd seen on the album. He had Can't Sit Down was the hit way back when I was young. And Sammy Lay on drums, and it was fun. He had a squeaky bass pedal, and we never could get rid of that, you know. Otis was always very kind to me, and he even wrote liner notes for my album by hand.
Well, I remember you told me that there was some Harvey Mandel kind of influence on it.
Yeah.
I also remember you telling me that you wanted it to sound like just what you might kind of just run into walking down the street. You know, it's almost more about ambience.
And a little LSD involved back in those days. I was so influenced by, I wouldn't listen to anybody. I wanted to produce it myself. You know, I could have used you, you know, but no, I'm a stubborn guy. I have these plans that don't always pan out. So I had this concept for an album, an instrumental blues psychedelic album. How could it miss, right? I was real into Harvey Mandel and his playing, and he always had strings and horns in the background, right? It made a lot of sense. And then Electric Mud had come out sometime around then. It's like wine. The longer it sits on the shelf, the better it gets. And so maybe, you know, so I'm probably going to have to die till somebody will dig it out again. But if you'd have helped me produce it, it would have been much better. It was 8-track then. It was Scully 8-track, and that was it. That was it. You know, that was the maximum tracks you could get at that time in '69. Strings, and you've heard it.
What's some of the recordings that you played on earlier in your career that people might have heard?
Well, Circus, you heard that, you gave that to Jimmy Burns. Actually, I had that written when I was playing with Otis, and I played it for Otis, and I said, Otis, man, this would be great if you'd sing it, you know. And so I played the Circus, which, you know, it's really a blues. It's the saddest blues song in the world. Actually, Bobby Bland's Wolf manager passed on it. I said, what's wrong with the song? He goes, it's too sad, man.
I guess I've been in the circus too long. Wanna go home.
The guy who sang St. James Infirmary, I went down and I heard my baby groan and I knew she was gone. My song is too sad for Bobby Bland. And he goes, yeah, I'm afraid so. I actually played Circus for Otis, and he just kind of hesitated for a while. And I said, man, if you sing this, it'd be great. And he goes, well, that's the way you feel. That's not the way I feel. And it took him a long time to compose himself, but he said it's kind of like you built an airplane and you're the only one that knows how to fly it. So why don't you, you know, when we're warming up and doing the warm-up stuff, I'll bring you up and you can sing it. And I'm going to sing next to Otis Rush, right? So we put that on the shelf for 50 years, and now Jimmy Burns might do it, but you never know.
So let's talk about your movie career, the Monitors.
The Monitors, I was an extra in a movie. I used to hang around at Mother Blues. At the other end of the block was Second City, and at that time, David Steinberg and Peter Boyle and all those guys I used to go down and watch them after I'd played with Otis, a guy named Fred on piano. We used to go up and go in the light booth and, you know, smoke a little doobies with these guys. And so I was hanging around, and Bernie Salins, very good, thank you. Bernie Salins he asked me if I wanted to be in a movie, and I said, oh, hell yeah. You know, shit, I'm playing Otis Rush. I went to Woodstock, man. I've been on an Otis tour. Oh, yeah, man, I love show business, man. This is working out for me. So I was an extra for about a month on The Monitors, you know, and I had The Monitors is a science sci-fi. It's on YouTube if you want to go look at it, but it was all these little guys that walked around in a hat, but that was my movie experience, so that was... I'd play with Otis till 3 in the morning, and then on call it was like 5 in the morning. You had to go to makeup and all that stuff,
geez.
And so I liked all that stuff. You know, you go into makeup and they put Kleenex in here, and then you'd walk. If you're on location, you'd walk around. People, well, he's in the movie. You know, can I have your autograph? Yeah, sure. All right. That's right. Read that.
So before we leave the Aquarian age, you mentioned Woodstock. What your memories of that since you were there?
That was right around the Albert Hotel in the Paul Butterfield, meeting him and all that. It was I wanted to go, and it had rained all 3 days on and off, and drove up with my then girlfriend. Drove up Saturday night to hear, I can't remember. Oh, Paul Butterfield was playing, I think. A bunch of other people, and then Hendrix was scheduled to play real late that night. And we drove up there, and we could only park about 5 miles from the scene, and we walked and walked and walked and walked and walked, and and they go, you don't want to go there, it's just a mess, and it was a free concert by then. Everybody had knocked the fences down, and I was a hippie, long hair and my bell bottoms, and I was slick, I really wanted to see Hendrix, but as it turned out, he didn't play till the next Sunday morning, and so it's a good thing, I guess. But that's my Woodstock experience. But I was there.
So, what led you away from Otis?
What led me away from Otis was I played with him for years, just the bad neighborhoods, and I had no idea how big Otis was. When I went to Mother Blues and auditioned for him and sat in with him, I had no idea. I thought Wolf and Otis and Magic Sam, I thought these guys were just a good local band. I had no idea they were already legends in Europe. They had already been recording for 10 years in Europe and Sweden. They were already legends. I had no idea, which helped me ultimately because I wasn't starstruck. He was just the leader of a good local band. I said, well, I got to join one of these local bands. I still didn't realize the magnitude of the writing and all the genius of it all and the legend of it all. So, playing with Otis, I really want to play more solos because I did 1 or 2 solos a set. But I was really getting into rock and roll, and the spandex and high heel shoes and stuff. I said that'd be really cool to play loud, to have a stack of Marshalls instead of my little 410 Fender Bassman amp. So I thought, well, I'll start a band. I'll start Horace Monster. I'll put some guys together.
And can you explain Horace Monster?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, right?
Both the name and
I know.
what the concept of the band was.
I must say, too, by the way, when I left Otis, Bob Levis called me. He actually called. This was before cell phones or anything, and we lived in a hippie crash pad, so you had to call the house, and there's Bill there, I'll go up and see you. And anyway, he got a hold of me, and he goes, Bill, I really want this gig, man, Otis Rush gig, but I don't want to step on your toes. And if you want the gig, just tell me, and I won't go after it, And I said, no, I'm just gonna start a rock band, and that's fine, man. And what a gentleman. I've never had anybody ask for my blessing. He said, can I take the gig? And he played with him to the very end. And we still see each other. We're still in touch. So Horace Monster. So this was before. Monsters of Men and Monsters of Rock and the great monster Mike Welsh. So I wanted to play rock and roll, so I knew this guitar player, and so what are we going to call the band? I was born Horace William Pruitt III, which is really a stupid name, but I had nothing to do with that. How about Horace Monster? He played with Otis. He must be a good guitar player. So we ended up with a 4-piece hard rock band, and we had the same personnel for 7 years without a personnel change. I think 75 we were voted the #1 club act by the Reader annual poll, and I was around some pretty good company then. In that year, REO Speedwagon was playing bars. They were from Champaign at the Red Lion. We used to play the Red Lion. Styx, Buddy Miles, I knew when he come through town. Shaka Khan and Rufus, which she, by the way, rehearsed with us a few times, and she was going to play with us. The deal was in the end that her drummer had to come with her, and we'd have to get rid of our drummer. And I was too loyal at that time. I was loyal. I wanted this band to last forever. And so as time went on, I thought, man, we're going to do something. I mean, we're the top bar band, but, bar stars, where's that going to go? As time went on, there was this coup d'etat that happened, and I didn't even see it coming. I was living in a truck then. For some reason, I don't know, they wanted to take over the band. So they said, hey, Bill, we're writing all these songs, and you do all the work, you collect the money, you talk, the club owners. Why don't we get a manager, and then we'll have more time to write and be a band, and we're brothers, man, we're going to travel, we're going to be together forever. And I said, oh, okay, sure. And I suspected nothing. And so as time went on, over that year, I was looking at my date book, and the dates were getting thinner and thinner. And so we got this manager who'd never managed a band. He wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. There was one last gig up in Wisconsin somewhere in the dead of winter. I said, when's our next gig? And he said, don't worry about it. And I said, oh, okay. So I didn't worry about it. So after that gig, I drove back, and I'm living in my truck, and I had a nice little. It was a '66 Dodge van, a little phone truck, but it had a toilet and a little sink and a little. I was perfectly happy. Since I was in the military, I looked at it like I was living in a submarine. It was fun, and you only had to drive one way anywhere you went because you were home when you shut your engine off. The next morning, Dave knocks on the door, on my van. What? Dave comes in and he goes, what? He says, what? He's shaking and sweating. And I said, what's wrong, man? He goes, I got some bad news for you, man. And I said, well, it's okay. And I'm comforting him, and he's shaking. And he says, the band wants to go on without you. They want to keep the name and go on without you. And I said, oh, okay. They want to get rid of Horace, right? And they said, well, yeah, they want to go on and play without you. Anyway, it's a shame because, I love those guys, and I went, how do you, Mark Skyer knows. He says, I don't understand how this whole thing happened. How do you throw Bon Jovi out of Bon Jovi? How did you let it happen? I said, I didn't let it happen, Mark. It was a very cool, calculated coup d'etat, and I have no idea I was blindsided, And then they played for about a year. Every club that I played, I'd always dealt with the club owners. They'd say, what happened to Horace? And they'd say, he lost interest in music. He quit. And they said, what? And the club owners couldn't believe it. And they played every club once and burned it out. And so after that, I didn't like bands very much. So I did an acoustic solo in Ground Rounds and Rusty Scuppers for a while. And then I did, my looping thing, which is a one-man band.
Okay. So, how about a little, to play the blues now, you gotta have a little bit of slide, you know what I'm saying? A little bit of, yeah. Mississippi, Fred McDowell, all those guys from way down the Mississippi Delta. Yeah, see, they like to play a little bit of slide. So dig it.
Let's double back for just a minute, though. Can you talk about what Horace Monster's act was like with the double neck and lighting the organ?
Yeah, we lit the organ on fire. We had flash bombs. We had two double neck guitars and a bass and lead, and we'd switch off playing bass. It was a four-piece band, basically. That's where I learned my backwards double somersault. We used to do that with the double neck guitars. And bands weren't really doing that then. The Who. And it was just a fire show and just lots of sulfur dioxide in the air. People smoked cigarettes then, and the club was packed with smoke. And then we'd set off these flash bombs every set, and it was a good act. It was a real entertaining act, and it's a shame because I'd love to. Today we could be doing little summer festivals like Shadows of Night, and those guys we were a popular enough band where they could have said the original Horace Monster with the original members.
Yeah, they played the Arcada in St. Charles.
Yeah, we could have, but we never did, and I never knew what the story was with those guys because I never talked to them again in 40 years. So too bad. We could have been a great little festivals band. We did a lot of original stuff, and it was good stuff. I went on with Horace Monster as a three-piece power blues band, and then much later on, when the dust settled, in many reincarnations. I always have these ideas for, like, our original 8x10 Horace Monster shot when we first got the band together. The first 8x10 is us trying to get arrested. We played the island in Lincoln Park Lagoon, and we thought, okay, here's my idea. We're going to rent a generator, and we'll rent the rowboats and go over to the island in the Lincoln Park Lagoon. We'll set up and we'll play. We'll do a real good show, and then the police will come because we don't have a permit, and we'll get arrested and we'll get famous, man. We'll be, and so we couldn't even get arrested. We did it that day, and we took all these pictures, which was our first press kit. We played this. It was great. We played. I looked down for a solo and played this long 10-minute solo, and then I looked up and the whole bank was covered with people, and I had a buddy that I'm still in touch with, and he tried to get the police to arrest us, and the sergeant came and the cops cars, and they had binoculars, And my buddy was going, "You gonna arrest these guys?" You know, and he said, "It looks like everybody's having a good time." Yeah, but they don't have permits or anything. We couldn't even get arrested. You know, so that's
a cliche in there.
Yeah, right. Can't even get arrested. And so we were real disappointed. You know, that's some of my ideas. Like in Bill and the Heideckers, I had another great idea. I thought we used to go to this place, Merrill's Heidecker, and there was a DJ, a live booth, a glass booth on top of this drive-in restaurant. And my best buddy and I, we said, you know, how are we going to get Bill and Heideckers famous? And we used to go and watch this guy broadcast live, and you'd turn on your old tube radio in the car and listen to him broadcast live. That was some technology. You know, all the people in the drive-in. I said, you know what? Let's go. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go out in front, and we're going to get his attention. He'll call us up to the booth, and then we'll play our songs, and we'll be on the radio. And I go, that's brilliant. So we go out there one night, and there's a big lawn in front of the restaurant. The place is packed with all these lowrider cars, you know. And it wasn't called lowrider then. I had a raked car. It was like that. So we're jumping around. We're doing somersaults, trying to get this guy's attention. And we had our little transistor radio. We were listening. And after about an hour, he goes, "Well, we're down here at Merrill's Heidecker broadcasting live, and we got a couple of clowns out here rolling around." And he goes, they're acting like real idiots, but you should come down to Merrill's Heidecker. I said, "Why don't you? He'll invite us up." And of course, he never did. So those are some of my ideas.
I didn't care what mama let allow. I was boogie anyhow. I was walking down Hastings Street. I heard everybody talking about the Henry Swank Club. I decided I'd drop in there one night. And I was glad I did. And I got there. I said, "Yes, people." You was really having a ball. Boogie.
So let's talk about Lowell George.
Lowell, yeah. Yes, Lowell George, to me, he was just the greatest, singer and slide player. And I had seen him in Mother's of Invention when I heard the Paul Butterfield at Cafe A Go-Go. And so I'd always followed him, and listened to his music and Little Feat, F-E-A-T, by the way. So one night he's playing at Park West, and this was just a few weeks before he died. I bought an NBC jacket from the NBC store, but back then there was no security. You just walk like you know what you're doing, and they'd see a guy with an NBC jacket, and they go, "Oh, go ahead," and I go, "Excuse me." And so I got in there for sound check, and Lowell was there. I said, "Lowell, I'm a guitar player, and I've got a bunch of songs here. Maybe you'd be kind enough to consider recording, something." He'd go, "Oh, okay." So he took the songs, and everything, and went through the rest of the sound check there that night, and talked to him some more, and became friends with him. And so after the show, I thought, well, I went home. So I said, well, I forgot completely about that. And then about a year later, I got this letter. I opened it, and the letter said,
December 9th, 1979. This letter is at least a year old, but I thought you'd like to have it. Sincerely, Elizabeth George.
Well, here's the letter I got from Lowell George. And it still gives me chills, and it means a lot to me, and it's really precious to me. And he even wrote it on Holiday Inn stationery from the Holiday Inn on Lakeshore Drive. And I'll read a little for you. Hi, Billy. I read through some of your songs, and a couple caught my attention. If you have any demos, I would like to hear how you put them to music. A cassette of just voice, or guitar, or piano, it's fine for me. Sorry I couldn't make your gig last night, but I was beat. I did try to edit one lyric. This may be a bit presumptuous of me to suggest, but there is real potential and an interesting song idea. I hope I didn't offend you. I think you've got some good song ideas for your career and other artists to do as well. Believe me, that can do no harm, especially when the royalty checks come in. Thanks again, Lowell George. Whew. You know, what gives me the chills about this is that he talked to me as an equal. And he wrote this letter about 2 weeks before he died, and I didn't get it till a year later. And his wife, Liz, was nice enough to send it to me. So, just like his song says, so many letters don't get written and don't get sent. But I got mine. Thanks, Lowell.
All the letters never written that don't get sent. It comes from confusion.
And you said that among his legacies is your all-time favorite song?
Rock and Roll Doctor, to me, is just the ultimate, the way the words and the music and the rhythm density, Lowell used to say the rhythm density of the song, and the words about a rock and roll doctor, it's a monument he built to himself, and I think, to me, Rock and Roll Doctor is my favorite song ever.
So after the Horace Monster coup, when Horace was
I survived.
kicked out of the band,
A little damaged.
Let's talk about the solo years and the variety years.
The blues always rang true, but sometimes my art pulled me through.
The variety years, when I used to play solo at the Ground Rounds and Rusty Scuppers, was at the restaurants you just watch people chew. They chew and not clap. And the Ground Rounds had free peanuts, and so the whole 3 inches of peanut shells, and so you'd be doing a nice acoustic song, and people walk by you. And so I needed a gimmick again. Hey, here's a great idea. This is going to work. And so I had the Billy Pruitt Circus Show. I did all the vanishing cigarette tricks and the torn and restored newspaper and all that.
Do you think he's going to make it? Do you think he can handle it? The moment of magic comes. Watch this.
I thought that was kind of clever, but then doing tricks in front of drunk adults doesn't work because they don't take it well. You vanish something and they go, "Listen, buddy, where the hell did the cigarette go?" And I go, "Well, I don't," and they want to kick my ass, and so that didn't pan out too well. But I did magic tricks as part of the thing, and then as a solo act also, I wanted to play lead guitar and harmonicas because that's what I do. And when you're playing acoustic guitar, you can't play solo. So I had this before looping was invented. I thought, well, I want to record my own backing tracks, and then I'll play live. I'll play a solo live, and the people can see I play live, and then I'm in my own element. So I went to the studio, and I recorded the bass drums and rhythm guitar and all that. And so when I play live, I put a ghetto blaster, and I'd mic it, and this was folk clubs, and they hated it, because folk clubs are, traditional acoustic, God and nature, and, sunshine on my shoulder makes me happy. And I play these, I put on my backing tracks. The culmination of that was that I got a job at Oak Brook Saddle Club, way out in Oak Brook. And this guy, he hired me for like a week, and it was a good job. It was they were used to traditional folk music. So I do my Gordon Lightfoot, and then I'd say, okay, everybody, now here, I'm gonna play this. And so I put on the ghetto blaster, and then I had a little pig nose in my Stratocaster, so it was all distorted and everything. They just hated it. And so, but the audience responded well. And then right after the set, owner wants to talk to you. Couldn't be good. So I went over to the owner and I said, yeah. I said, pretty good, right? And he goes, no, we want people here who make their own music. We don't want karaoke. And I said, no, this isn't, listen, I am making my own music. I actually played everything that you're hearing. I'm playing it all, so I think it's kind of valid. And he goes, I'm not stupid. You can't play everything at once. Get the out. So I packed up my stuff, and that was it. So again, I said, well, the solo thing isn't going to work out either.
So talk about the Acme Thunder Band and Harvey.
Harvey Mandel was, Acme Thunder Band was the old Aliotta Haynes and Jeremiah. Skip Haynes had left the band, so I took Skip Haynes' place. Mitch Aliotta and John Jeremiah were in the band, and Bob Parisio, and a bunch of real good musicians. So they called it the Acme Thunder Band, so there wasn't a conflict with the, copyright and names and everything. So I played with them for a year. They were going to get 2 guitar players. They said, oh, if we can get Horace, we'll pay him more and just have 1 guitar player. I played with them for a long time, and we got along real well, and we did a lot of original stuff. In fact, they were all it was 100% original. But the club owners liked them because they had a name, John Jeremiah and Mitch Aliotta, and then Ted Aliotta played in the band too. So when I left the band, Harvey Mandel took my place. They had recorded a lot of songs that I wrote with Ted Aliotta.
Oh, and be careful on you're squeaking a lot on your.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. We can just say it's my stomach.
Yeah.
Because I'm with a legend.
I'll give you a Pepto-Bismol talk.
Yeah.
So what years did you play with the Acme Thunder Band?
I played with Acme Thunder from about 86 to maybe 89. Does that sound correct? Is it the right time frame?
Well, close enough for posterity. And
what's one note between friends?
Really? Talk about the Grease Lightning Nostalgia Band.
Well, I thought, let's see. We've done it all, but I want to play summer festivals since I won't have that opportunity with Horace Monster ever again. So John Orzel from Creative Sounds, he says, well, you guys put together, if you can put together a nostalgia band, I can book you, because there's a lot of older act, New Colony 6 and Ronnie Rice, all these guys, I can book you. So we put together the Greased Lightning Band, which was taken from a song John Travolta in, what's the movie?
Saturday Night.
Grease. Thank you very much.
Right.
So the Grease Lightning Band, we took the name from Grease, and it was pink guitars. Pink and black was the theme, and Cass Siva singing out in front, and we did that for a while, and that was fun. And we did a lot of summer festivals, but it was sort of a copy band. Wasn't much room for originals, wasn't much room for blues, so that's how I ended up going full circle in the end.
And then what led you off the music scene and when?
What led me off the music scene was I've been playing so long. I've been playing 6 decades, but I had carpal tunnel in my thumb here, a lot of pain, and it was hard to play. And so I thought, well, maybe my playing days are over. So I hung up my rock and roll shoes, and I just sat down and watched TV for years. Thanks to you, the Otis Rush tribute, the first one, came along.
Yeah, and before that, I didn't hear you play, but I ran into you when Charlie Musselwhite played at the College of DuPage, and we were both talking to him after the show. Yeah, that was the first time I'd seen you, probably since Horace Monster days, I think.
Right.
But yeah, then 2016, I was putting the Otis Rush tribute together at Grant Park for the Chicago Blues Festival, and I really had no idea what you were up to or anything like that, but I think Raul Hardman posted something about being on it, and you commented on his post, and when I saw your name, I can't remember exactly how it went from there, but I remember, I thought, well, yeah, hey, if you're still around, I mean, you were one of the first guys that taught me which end was up when I didn't know my posterior from a hole in the ground back in the day. So you were one of the first guys around here who was nice to me, saw that I had an interest. You gave me some advice when I made my first live tape of Otis over on Pulaski there. So anyhow, I mean, I was pleased that it had worked out, and there were a few people I didn't realize at the time how long it had been since they played. Sam Burton, the drummer, told me he hadn't played for 5 years, and of course now too many people are gone already from a show that was June of 2016. Eddie Clearwater, Mike Ledbetter, Eddie Shaw, and Otis, of course.
Shake, shake here, shake there, shake, baby. Now down even when you really wanna blow your top. That's them good old days with me, man. I get kind of sad when I hear stuff like that, because I know them guys ain't here no more, It makes me a little a little sluggish.
I was, I saw the Otis Rush tribute, and I thought, geez, I was his first permanent member. So I kept calling the city, and the girls would go, Richard Sherman is taking care of that, and that rang a bell. I said, well, tell Richard, Billy Pruitt is available. Let me check my schedule. Yeah, I can do it. And they kept saying, well, we gave him the message, and no response. It was so hard to reach you. And so finally you sent me an email. I saw Richard Sherman. I said, here's the Dear John letter. Because they said we got 20 guitar players already, and we don't need any more. And then you sent me that nice email that it said, you certainly deserve to play, and And that was... I appreciate that so much. And you got me back into, so you rekindled my whole spirit of wanting to play the blues again. And when I did that tribute, now I met all the young blood that's coming up, all the, Mike Wheeler.
All right, I got a friend that's gonna come up here and blow some harp with us. How about I tell you about the great Billy Pruitt?
Mike Ledbetter, and I would have never met them otherwise, and I've never publicly thanked you on camera, but, without that, I would still be at home watching TV. And so as it turned out, I ended up getting surgery on these hands, and now I can play better than I ever have, so I like where I am today. It's working out.
Let's talk about your recollections from the Otis Rush tribute at Space in April.
So my recollections of the last tribute, which was just a few months ago, is I got to meet Geneva Magnus and Curtis Salgado, and we really bonded because on the Blues Cruise, it was like an open jam, and I sat in, and he came out, and it was my first song, and he said, rumba and C, and I don't know what a rumba is, but I know that's what I knew from Wolf. And so I just started playing that, and right away he looked at me and he goes, who are you? And I said, Billy Pruitt, and he goes, oh. And so, but anyway, we got to be good friends, and then I backed him at the Otis Rush tribute, the last one in Evanston. I hope there's more, and everybody was there. It was just, it was a great night, and you produced it.
It's all true. So what are your passions in life now at this point?
I like where I am. I like just sitting in all the time. I don't want to load Marshall amps at 4 in the morning in the snow, and I like just jumping up and playing a set now and then, coming into blues or seeing who's playing, and everybody's really nice to me.
Yeah, you're somewhat of an animal activist. Can you talk a little bit about that? Not to mention having the oldest cat I know.
Yeah, he's 26 years old, String Cheese. That's my last animal. He fades away and comes and goes, and he's not eating today, but we'll see. I'm not a vegan, but I think Mark is. But I'm almost there. But kids are resilient. They can tell you when it hurts and all that, and they're always creative. But but animals always get the short end, and I'm real passionate about it. I have to do my part and commit random acts of kindness here and there, and I've met your cats.
Well, and I was going to mention just in passing that at least as of today, the Horace Monster coup was worth it, because if you hadn't been martyred by the band, then maybe Mark wouldn't have had the sympathy that led him to open up for us today and let us do this here.
Yeah, I know. So, and we were going to go to single file, and it was like a folk act, and Mark's done, he's been in Canned Heat and did a bunch of Harvey Mandel albums, but that didn't pan out so much. But it's another one of my ideas. I have a lot of ideas.
Yeah, we'll keep having them.
Billy plays this custom gold Strat and had Chicago's first music video in 1979. This was before MTV, and it was called Feels Like Gold. Another song that he wrote is Hollywood Sign. On March 3rd, 1982, David Letterman mentioned Billy on his network show. And later that year, Billy played a new event at Navy Pier called Chicago Fest. In 1990, he was featured on WTTW's Wild Chicago.
Bill Pruitt is a wild Chicago success story. A man who followed his bliss right into Lake Michigan at 70 miles an hour.
You get this thing going here, and oh my God! Did you see that? Did you see that, or was it me?
My friend Billy is still at it. He's still playing and living the blues.
How do you want to be remembered?
With a smile, I guess. You know, as a guy that had a pretty good little run, and I'm going for 100. You know, I think the oldest blues guy is actually probably Jimmy Johnson, or who did we say, Mark? Somebody else was...
Henry Gray.
Henry Gray is how old?
94.
Wow. See, so if I could pull 100 off and be the old blues guy, that would make my day. But if I don't make it, then we still got this. And I think we should do this in another 51 years.
Sounds good. I'm down.
Does that sound good? Are you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Great. That's a wrap.
Otis Rush had once told me the two most important days of our life are the day we were born and the day we discover why.
Thank you.